Hello and welcome to Board Game TV, and welcome back to the History of Comics, the Spectre series, part 3 of series 3. And so the third year would basically be 14 issues, a little over a year's worth of issues, and it basically is going to wrap up all the loose ends from the first 2 years. And it kind of has a big storyline at the beginning, and then it kind of ends with like a little mini storyline, and then we end with a crossover event. Now, the big storyline for this is the Asmodeus, the final confrontation between Asmodeus and the Spectre, and Asmodeus doing his planning and scheming. Now, we get a lot of origin stuff this year too, and basically the first issue of the series for this set is we get introduced to Percival Pop, Super Cop. Now, in the early days of the Spectre comics, mainly the first series, there was a character, he was kind of like Jim Corrigan's sidekick, named Percival Pop. He was a goofy, overweight patrol cop who always wanted to go get in adventures, and then he basically would end up getting in trouble, and he was a klutz, and the Spectre would bail him out. He was basically Jimmy Olsen or Lois Lane to the old Superman. And he was a kind of a throwaway, he was a worthless character. He was, but you know, for that time when he was written, that's how sidekicks were written. Yeah, so John tries to kind of redeem the character from being a total, everybody hated this character back in the days, to kind of make him a little bit better. So we meet the ghost of Percival Pop, who kind of seeks out the Spectre, and Spectre hadn't realized he died or anything like that, and Percival doesn't want to move on yet until he talks with the Spectre, and they go over some of their past adventures. And basically what happened was, once the Spectre killed Gatch and broke up with Clarice, he kind of ditched Waylon, his partner, because Waylon put his fiancée in danger, and teamed up with Percival Pop, who wanted to be a lot like Jim. The rest of the force hated him, but you know, Jim tolerated him, and they went on a bunch of crazy adventures, mainly Jim saving Percival Pop's butt because he was getting in over his head. But it was Percival Pop who came up with the idea, once the superheroes started showing up before World War II, it was Percival Pop who came up with the idea, were called Mystery Men, and came up with the costume kind of thing, because Jim at that time wasn't, when he did the Spectre stuff, he wasn't wearing the outfit or the costume or nothing like that. He would just kill people. And so Percival came up, well, look, you can have a secret identity or a dual identity and thing, just become a superhero like all these other guys. And so it was Percival that came up with the whole superhero identity thing. And then Jim kind of left him to go join the Justice Society and became a big superhero. And then he kind of, you know, Jim kind of disappeared for a little bit after World War II. And eventually Percival moved on, left the force, became a security guard, died an old man, and just kind of kept up with the Spectre over the years when he showed up. And so at the end, it's a touching history story to kind of redeem a goofball character, to show a little history of how Jim Corrigan started wearing the outfit for the Spectre, and why he quit being a cop and all that kind of stuff. And at the end, Percival Pop basically gets into heaven. So that's it. So then we kind of get the Asmodeus. Now, Asmodeus has basically been stealing souls, and he's basically stolen the soul of this one guy who's the head of this corporation. And he's kind of goading the Spectre here and there, causing events to happen to where the Spectre has to get involved, but Asmodeus always remains hidden. He never reveals himself. He just keeps getting a little bit stronger. And, you know, he keeps stealing these people's souls and have them doing bad things. So he starts to plan his revenge. So Madame Xanadu basically conjures up these two spirit elemental type things that are supposed to do her bidding, but Asmodeus just screws it up, and basically these spirits are there to forever torture her. She can't die, but they're forever to torture her, and like she would wish for something, but it would go awry. It would always be kind of like the monkey's paw type thing. So he's done that. He's got his revenge on her. He's kind of eliminated her from the board for a little bit. He digs up the body of Amy, and Nate Kane gets assigned to the case, and he makes it look like the Spectre's involved with it. So he gives Nate this gun, and he tells him that this gun can kill or hurt the Spectre. And Nate's like, what is it, blessed by holy water? And Asmodeus is like, and Asmodeus is appearing as his corporation dude, not as his true form. It's like, he can do much worse to it. And so he gives him that. And so the Nate Kane is starting to hunt for Jim Corrigan, the Spectre, to take him down. He blows up the Church of the Holy Scepter and doesn't kill Father Kramer, but makes Father Kramer dang sure know that he did it. And he does it just to make Father Kramer try and go in despair. But that kind of doesn't break Father Kramer, but it puts him a little bit on the edge. And the Spectre's getting furious. Asmodeus is doing all these things, and the Spectre just can't catch him, can't figure out where he's at, and causing all these problems. Well, finally, Asmodeus really is going to make his move. So, one day the Spectre feels some pain, and he doesn't quite get what it's from, and he has this thread connected to him, and he follows the thread. And he follows the thread to this old lady that's in a coma at this house, this big estate, rich house. And so he enters her soul, and he finds out it's Clarice Winston. Clarice apparently never recovered from Jim leaving her. She started doing drugs. She tried to kill herself. She married this Hollywood guy, but it was only marriage convenience because he was gay. He just wanted to hide he was gay, so she ended up getting a lot of his money. But every time she tried to kill herself, she couldn't die. She could never figure it out. And it's because she's connected to the Spectre through this life force thread, so she's never been able to die. Well, she's kind of in a coma right now because her daughter tried to kill her, basically, and normally it would have killed her, but she's still alive. Now, the daughter looks a lot like Clarice when she was younger. The daughter hates her, okay? Or the granddaughter, I'm sorry. So Clarice had a son, but she doesn't care for her son all that much. She doesn't hate him, but she doesn't really care for him. She did her family duty, had the son with this guy she was once married to, and of course he's dead now, and the son is just there. He's nothing remarkable about him, but the son got married and had a daughter, and the daughter looks like Clarice, and so she kind of likes the daughter. Fortunately, it's the daughter that put her in the coma to try to kill her. And the Spectre finds this out, that the daughter is the one that tried to kill Clarice. So the Spectre is going to judge her. And the Spectre tells Clarice what happened, why he couldn't do it, how he became the Spectre, and all this stuff. She thought that when she saw photos of him later on in life as a private detective and stuff, she thought that Jim had gone and remarried and had a son, and the son just looked a lot like Jim. And so, she started trying to kill herself and all that kind of stuff. Oops. So, Jim, what he decides, since he feels so bad for Clarice and what happened to her, and the granddaughter needs to be punished for trying to kill Clarice, he basically switches their souls into each other's body. He puts the soul of the granddaughter in Clarice's old, decrepit body, and puts Clarice's soul in the young granddaughter's body. And then he asks her, do you want me to cut the cord and kill your body, which will kill your granddaughter? And Clarice is like, no, I want to try to help her, try to redeem her, to get her back, and try to make her see the light. And so the Spectre's okay. So he works things out with Clarice. She's got a new lease on life, and she's trying to redeem the granddaughter. And you think everything's a happy ending. Then Asmodeus comes in. So Asmodeus comes in and offers the granddaughter, who's stuck in that Clarice's old body, He says, look, I can give you your health back. I can give you your youth back. All I want are a couple things in return. One, I want your soul, and then two is I want you to do what I tell you with according to how to handle Clarice. And she agrees. So she miraculously wakes up from the coma, and she starts kind of de-aging, starts looking young again. Of course, when she wakes up from the coma, she accuses Clarice of being the one who tried to kill her to put her in the coma. And of course, since she's the one who actually committed the crime, she knows where all the evidence is and everything. So Clarice, still in the young body now, gets arrested for trying attempted murder. Of course, the son, he's like, he still thinks it's his daughter. He's like, look, I'll do what I can. I don't have any money. Your grandmother's the one with all the money. I'll do what I can to try to get you the best lawyers and get you out of jail. So Clarice gets thrown in jail, and of course, she's suffering in jail, and she's like, what's going on? Is this punishment? Why ain't you help me, Jim? And then Asmodeus shows up in jail and offers, says, give me your soul, and I'll get you out of this predicament. But she refuses. She doesn't take the bait. So she's stuck in jail. Meanwhile, Asmodeus, since he's got Clarice's daughter's soul in the older body, and the older body has that thread connected to the spectre, he's siphoning power from the spectre. So he's gaining more and more power, and he's setting up all these little power plays. Well, eventually he tells the granddaughter to bail Clarice out of jail. So she does. She bails Clarice out of jail. And then we're going to finally get to the end game that Asmodeus plans to do. Okay, so Asmodeus is making his final moves. And his little corporate tower, he's stolen the souls of all the people that work there, and he's making them kill each other and everything like that. And so he calls Detective Kane, Nate Kane, and says, hey, please help, the Spectre's here, he's causing problems. And so Nate rushes to the place. And then finally, when Nate gets there, he sees all the people killing each other themselves. They're all going, Hail Spectre, Hail Spectre. So finally, Asmodeus reveals himself, and the Spectre confronts him. Of course, Asmodeus is still in the corporate guy's body. Nate Kane shows up, and Asmodeus tells him, the Spectre's fixing to kill me, please help. And then he basically destroys the body that he's in from within, to make it look like the Spectre did it. And the Spectre's kind of confused and is like telling Nate, wait, before you act, something's not going on, something's not right. And Nate just says, screw it, and shoots the Spectre. This almost kills the Spectre and leaves him pretty weak. And then Asmodeus in his true form shows up, thanks Nate, and Nate realizes he got hoodwinked. And Asmodeus tells him, well, there's nothing you can do about it. You're fixing to have your own problems. And all the people in the building are kind of like zombified now, and they're going after Nate, and they're led by the corpse of Amy, who's been possessed by an evil spirit. So he's got all these rotting corpses led by Amy chasing him in the corporate building. Asmodeus takes the Spectre to where the Church of the Holy Spectre used to be and starts torturing him. Well, Madame Xandu shows up and says, hey, I got control of these guys. I'm a sorceress. I can get control of them. So I got control of them. We're going to fight you. But Asmodeus kind of just dismisses her. Says, well, okay, you got control of them. Good for you. I know you're immortal, so I have the power now. And so he turns her basically into a statue. She's alive, but she's a statue. She can't do anything. Father Kramer's there. He's making Father Kramer be witness to all this. There's a pit hole open now where the church used to be that leads to hell. And of course, Clarice and her daughter show up, and the son show up. And Asmodeus tells the granddaughter to kill Clarice. And she's like, gladly. And he asked Father Kramer, now what do you think the Spectre is going to do when the granddaughter kills Clarice? And he's like, he's going to try to cast judgment on her. And so he's like, yes, he will. So everything's playing in Asmodeus' hands, and the granddaughter is about to kill Clarice when the son steps in, and he doesn't quite understand what's going on, and he's like, "Look, don't do this. I don't quite understand what's going on. I don't know how you're in your grandmother's body and all this stuff." And the granddaughter's like, "Get out of my way. I'm going to kill her." And Asmodeus is like, "Look, kill him. Kill him. He gets in the way. Kill him." And she kind of refuses to kill him. And she's like, "I've done everything for him. All this I did for him. I love my father." And so he's like, "Okay, you either kill him or I'm going to take away your youth and health." And she's like, "Okay, well, you take away my youth and health. I renounce all this." And he takes away her youth and health, and he tells her again to kill him, and she doesn't. So he basically throws her into hell. And he's just going to kill Clarice and the son by himself. Meanwhile, all this is going on, Nate is fleeing from Amy's body in the building, and it's almost to the point where he's going to get killed when Percival Pop shows up, the ghost of Percival Pop, and fights off all the zombie evil demons and tells Nate, "Look, you messed up. You put the Spectre in a bad position. It's up to you to save the day. So go help them. They're at where the church used to be." So Nate goes to head to the church. The Spectre's still powerless. Basically, he's in prison. He can't do anything. And Asmodeus decides he's had enough of Father Kramer's mouth and throw him into hell too. However, the Spectre uses what little power he has and unturns Madame Zandu back from a statue to a living person and tells her to try to rescue or save Father Kramer, which she does. And then while all this is going on, when it seems like Asmodeus has everything won, Nate shows up and points the gun at him. Of course, Asmodeus is like, "Your little gun can't hurt me." And Nate's like, "Don't you remember? This is the gun you gave me, you idiot." And shoots Asmodeus and basically weakens him so much to where he's going to die. However, he still has the power of the Spectre flowing through him because of his connection to Clarice. So Clarice tells the Spectre, "Look, switch me back into my body and then let me die. Okay? Take my granddaughter, get my granddaughter, put her back in her body, put me back in my body, and then let me die." So the Spectre does that. They kind of get the body back from hell. And he switches them out. She dies. Clarice dies. And the daughter is saved. And Clarice is no longer letting Asmodeus siphon power from her anymore. So Asmodeus doesn't have that power anymore. And Asmodeus is real weak. So now you're kind of wondering, why is Asmodeus doing all this? What's his goal? Well, we finally learned Asmodeus' origin. The first Spectre, the Hindu Spectre, the first Spectre that had a human soul to it, the Hindu Spectre, had been going around doing his thing for a while, and the forces of hell decided he's too much of a threat. He's causing problems. Mankind is not wanting to send with this guy around, so they get this succubus to go tempt him into turning. And of course she tries to tempt him and she fails. She shows him, she says, "Look, all you do is for naught. Mankind's still going to sin. I'll show you the future where there's these big buildings and people are still sinning." And of course he doesn't believe her or anything. And then finally she says, "Well, go into this alley over here." So he goes into this alley and he sees this girl thief killing these people for their money. And he's fixing to judge her and accordingly and kill her. But the succubus tells him, "Before you do it, look at her soul. Look at her true soul." And he sees the soul of his daughter. And he doesn't understand, but he's duty bound to punish her. So he actually punishes her, kills her, and sends her soul back to Nirvana to be reincarnated again, and maybe she'll come back and do better. And he's starting to get upset. He's starting to break. And then the succubus says, well, here, let me show you something else. So they go to this other place and they see this prostitute who had become a leper getting stoned to death by the crowd. And that was what they did to cleanse the body and purify the soul, and their soul will go to nirvana and come back as a better person. So he's like, well, they're in their right to do this. She's a leper. She's unclean. She says, the succubus tells him, yes, but look at her soul. See her soul. And so he looks at her true soul, and it's his wife. And finally that breaks him. She dies. The wife dies. It finally breaks him. That's it. He's finally, I've renounced all this. I'm not doing this anymore. From now on, I'm going to destroy the earth and everything in it. And then Michael appears and tells him he can't do that. Fights him, beats him. But he realizes the little succubus thing had a part to play in it. So he basically merges the soul of Asmodeus and the succubus together and throws them into hell. But they vow that from now on, they will hunt down every specter that exists and destroy it. And so that's the origin of Asmodeus, and he has done that. All the other specters fell to Asmodeus. Asmodeus had beat them all and got a portion of their soul, and it's kind of where he gets some of his powers from as well. And Jim Corrigan is just the next specter that he has to kill and beat. However, and the reason that they say his wife and he gets so mad about it is because his wife and daughter, though they went to Nirvana after he freed them from that Lady Bellatane, he became the specter. So he wasn't reunited with their souls in Nirvana, so they weren't able to find peace, so they had to come back, and then they strayed. So he basically blames God and everything for his predicament. And when it was him who wanted to do that in the first place. So that's why he's so evil. That's why he's so against the specter. But you can kind of feel where he's coming from. You kind of did get the gist that he kind of did get a raw deal a little bit. Even though he chose that, he didn't think about the consequences of his actions of choosing to be the specter. All he wanted was vengeance for the lady on the lady who killed him and his family. He didn't think about none of that. But you kind of do get the sense that he kind of did get a raw deal, and you kind of feel for him a little bit. Well, it turns out that the specter's going to beat him, and it turns out Clarice is the reincarnated spirit of his wife, of Asmodeus' wife. And that's why she was attracted to Jim, because she kind of knew that, kind of saw some of the power or what is in him, and she kind of thought he was the reincarnated version of her husband. So the human part of Asmodeus, the man who became the first specter and all that, reunites with Clarice, which is really his reincarnated version of his wife. He basically disavows all the evil he ever did and redeems himself and goes to paradise. Spectre destroys the succubus. The daughter and the son are alive, but they're kind of changed forever. Madame Xandu is now, she's back to how she was, but now she has these spirits that are always kind of, she can control them, but she always has to fight to control them. She's always having to fight against them and use every bit of her will to control them. And Father Kramer ends up not having a church anymore. As a matter of fact, he ends up being kicked out of the church. They have an inquiry. He's like, just go send me someplace else. You know, the church explosion was a horrible thing. I go work someplace else. But the church is like, no, you've kind of strayed from the teachings anyways, from your teachings. This was your last chance. You kind of screwed it up. And the specter is kind of upset about the way the church is treating him. But Father Kramer at the last seconds, look, like, you know what? You're right. I don't adhere to the doctrine of the church. I don't really have any business being a priest if I can't adhere to the doctrine. So he quits being a priest and is thinking about going to become a priest for another denomination like Episcopalian or something like that. And basically all's well ends well. They end up the storyline. It's very good. It's one of the best, if not the best, since the last half of the first year stories in it, and it is violent, it is gruesome, but it is pacing. You can see Asmodeus coming with his plan, getting it step by step, knowing he's putting all these pieces in place, and it's really good, and it's really, he had the Spectre beat. He really did. If it wasn't for a couple fluke things, he would have had one. But this ends Asmodeus. Asmodeus is no longer in the rest of the series. Asmodeus is a character that's as old almost as the Spectre himself, and it was a great send-off to him. It was just a riveting, good story, and it was really good. Nate Kane kind of redeems himself a little bit here as well. So basically all the storyline from the past couple years tied up, and we got to see the origin of the Spectres and the origin of Asmodeus and why he hates the Spectre so much. It was really good. It's one of my favorites. Just me telling you about it can't do it justice. Just read it and see what a great plan it was. So that's that part of the year. Next part of the year, we're going to have an annual, and it's a year one annual. Every DC Comics character that year for their annual had a year one annual. And basically the year one theme was you're going to tell a story about the first year of that hero, one of their adventures from the first year. And so basically this year one annual is basically Jim and Father Kramer talking, just chatting, and Jim's kind of going over his past as a Spectre, and again kind of retelling his origin a little bit. And he's telling about one of the first big adventures he has where he realized there was more to the Spectre power than he thought. And it was basically about a murder mystery where this guy gets killed, but it's a supernatural type of killing, and it has to deal with the Pentagon, when the Pentagon was built. And come to find out, one of the architects of the Pentagon is trying to conjure up this ancient Lovecraftian demon back into our world, and Spectre teams up with Dr. Fate because Dr. Fate gets on it, and they kind of work together kind of well, even though they really don't like each other, but they have a cool dynamic, and it's pretty cool to see Dr. Fate and the Spectre work together. But he realizes the first time that there was more to the Spectre powers when the ancient demon is finally summoned, and it's a huge ancient Cthulhu type Lovecraftian demon. And he doesn't even blink an eye. The Spectre power takes over, grows to be huge, as bigger than the Cthulhu type demon, and just stomps the hell out of the demon. And as the first real adventure, and with him and Dr. Fate, and he says, that at that point in time, I knew there was more to the Spectre power than I thought. I didn't realize what it was, but I kind of had an inkling kind of what it was about that time, when it just. If I'd have been a normal guy put in that situation, I'd have died of fright. Well, that Spectre power just took over and demolished that thing. So it was a pretty good year one annual. The rest of the year is basically 3 issues where Jim Corrigan decides he wants to be a detective again, a cop. He wants to work with Nate Kane and be his partner. Of course, Nate's against it from the get-go, says it can't even work. There's paperwork and stuff that needs to be done. But Jim freezes time and tells Nate all the paperwork's accounted for. Your boss even puts me next to you as your partner. Everything's done. I've magically had it to where I can be your partner now and we can solve crimes. So basically, this 3 issues is kind of a homage to the old EC Comics days because they're facing these supernatural crimes. And they build a rapport with each other, Nate and Jim. Kind of a love-hate relationship, but one of respect. And basically, they take on a modern-day version of Frankenstein's monster where the scientists in this laboratory created one. They defeat it. There's this guy with all these multiple personalities, but one of the personalities is a supernatural killer, and they defeat it. And then there's this thing with vampires, where these vampires are running Hollywood, and they're actresses and actors in Hollywood, and they're on the boards of these movie companies. And it's basically John saying that Hollywood people are nothing but a bunch of vampires. And they've kind of gotten out of control, and so people start dying, and the Spectre goes and kills them in this old B-movies 1950 fashion. It's pretty good, and there's a good little it's kind of like a catch your breath or take a break type of story from all the serious of the Asmodeus type thing. You build a good rapport with Nate and Jim as they are partners. You get these supernatural creepy storylines thrown in where the Spectre takes care of them, and they're fun. They're just fun homages back to that. And then the last is this Underworld crossover. It's a 2-issue crossover Underworld, and let me see, I have to explain Underworld, so let me think for a second. Okay, so Underworld was this big event from DC. Of course, it's not that great of an event. It's basically all been forgotten. It wasn't a success when it came out, but it was basically an event to revamp a lot of the castaway villains or goofy villains or create new ones for all the heroes. And these villains were supposed to be more powerful than their older versions or whatever. Every comic had a tie-in to it, and it reintroduced these villains. I don't think any of these villains ever reappeared again, or if they were already existing villains. Like, I know the Scarecrow was one of them. They kind of did away with the whole thing. And basically what it is this guy named Neron, who's this demon, is basically offering all these villains souped up powers for their souls or something like that. And the Spectre could easily beat him, but they had to get the Spectre kind of occupied. So basically what they did was Neron offers the Spectre a deal to let him free and go on. Of course, Jim Corrigan refuses the deal, but the Spectre power does not. So Jim Corrigan basically is now a ghost, and the Spectre's running around doing what he does best. And Jim Corrigan can't quite understand, because he's like, look, the Spectre's got to be tied to a human soul. And so he goes to Michael. Michael's, look, the rules aren't being broken. It is tied to human soul. So you come to find out basically that Neron bonded Louis Snipe, the old stool pigeon, to the soul of the Spectre. And the Spectre's so dominant that Louis Snipe can barely control him. It's just enough to keep the rules in place. And so basically the Spectre, with the help of Madame Xanadu, they go in and exorcise Louis Snipe from the Spectre. And so the Spectre doesn't have a soul now. And so Michael forces Jim Corrigan and the Spectre to reunite. And that's that. That's basically the 2-issue Underworld thing. It's not one of the strong points, but it was part of a crossover, which the Spectre really couldn't be a part of the main crossover. Otherwise, nothing would happen. The Spectre would win. Neron would get defeated or whatever in the main books. His goal all along was to corrupt Shazam or something. I don't know. I don't remember much about it. All the Batman stuff from it wasn't that good. Like I said, it was one of the failed. DC would start coming out with crossovers, man, and they just wouldn't be as good. They weren't that good around this time. And Underworld Unleashed was a good idea. Don't get me wrong, it's a good idea. It's a way to inject new life into comics and bring new villains in and revamp some villains. Mr. Freeze got revamped, but I think they just did away with that later on. They never stuck with it. It didn't quite sell. It didn't quite work. So there's that. But that's the 3rd year of the Spectre, and it's a very good year. I enjoy it very much, even though the latter half of that year wasn't as strong as the first half. The whole Asmodeus thing was fantastic, and the whole Jim and Nate being partners tackling supernatural cases was fantastic as well, in a different way. The Underworld's a little weak, but it's not terrible, okay? It's not really terrible. So you know, it's a good year. It's one of the best years of the book. It rivals that of the first year, especially with the Asmodeus thing. So that's year 3 of the Spectre. We're going to be getting into year 4, and year 4 is the most controversial. So I got a lot to say about year 4.